Hey guys, thanks for joining me today. So what you see here is kind of an assortment of some different Kydex accessories, and if you've ever checked into purchasing like a custom Kydex holster or a knife sheath or something, you'll know that it can get really pricey really fast. I mean, just taking this holster for example, if you went to go purchase a custom Kydex holster for one of your firearms, it could cost you, depending where you get it, maybe $60, $70, maybe even $80 just for one holster. And that's really pricey, really steep, and I think that's one reason why a lot of people don't have, nice Kydex holsters. Same goes for knife sheaths, can be very pricey. Not to mention them being expensive. These are items that are handmade and they're, really high in demand, which means that oftentimes there's waiting periods. I mean, you may have to wait several weeks or maybe even several months just to get your item once you order it. So because of all that, I started to check into how hard it would really be just to make my own, just buy the materials, put in my own time, my own effort, and it turns out that it's really not that hard, and it's something that you should probably consider and probably check into, and you can really get some nice stuff for a lot less money than you would think. So, I'm just going to show you some of the things that I've made here recently, tell you a little bit about them, and then at the end of the video, I'll refer you to some really good resources if you're interested in making your own Kydex stuff. Alright guys, so one of the first things that I made when I got my Kydex in is this. And this is a new shell for my white hat holsters inside the waistband holster. And the shell that came on this holster when I bought it was this one, and this is for the SIG P226, and I carried it around with that on there, and it was nice enough, but I wanted to get some experience carrying a little bit smaller gun and kind of get a feel for that. So I could have gone to White Hat and just purchased a whole new shell from them. And one of the nice features about this holster is that it is screwed on there, so you can replace that shell. You don't just have to go buy a whole new holster. But I could have gone to them and bought a new shell, and it would have run me around $20, which is actually not that bad when you think about it. I mean, some companies you'd have to go out and buy a whole new holster for like $60 or $70. So $20, I was thinking wasn't too bad. But when I started looking into making it myself, I was able to do it for a lot cheaper. And when I buy the Kydex, it comes in these 12 by 12 sheets, and I'll tell you where I got this, later in the video. And I was able to get it for just under $4 a sheet. So, I used not even half a sheet when I made this. So, I mean, around $2 to make this new shell is really phenomenal. I mean, it's like a tenth of the price of, if I'd gone and bought it instead of making it myself. So you can definitely save a lot of money when you're, making these things yourself. Alright guys, so what you're seeing here, this is the custom Kydex sheath that I made for my Knives of Alaska Alpha Wolf, and I actually really like this knife. You will see a review out on it once I have a little bit more testing under my belt with it. But the sheath that actually came with the knife is this one, and it's a leather sheath. And I mean, it's not a bad sheath, it's well made, but I'm just not a big fan of leather in the outdoors, just in general. It holds water when it gets wet, I mean, it doesn't dry out very quickly. And the other thing about the sheath is that it didn't have very good attachment methods. All you could really do is just kind of, stick it on your belt. And when you're wearing a backpack, that's not exactly ideal. So I wanted to make something else for it, and so I made this Kydex one. And I really like the way it turned out. It's I mean, it's not perfect. If you went and bought a one made by a custom Kydex maker that's been doing it a long time, it would definitely have better fit and finish. But functionality wise, this thing works great, and I'm really happy with it. So, I mean, not to mention, it cost me like $5 to make, which is outstanding. So as you can tell, I just slip it onto my my backpack strap like this. I just stick it under this horizontal strap. I have a soft loop on there that snaps, and I can run it vertically. It does retain in there tight enough that I can do that safely, and I really like that. As I'm hiking along the trail, I have a knife really accessible, and that's important. I mean, there's been lots of stories of like cougar attacks and different stuff where having a knife readily available is a really good idea. So I can have it right there when I get to camp if I want to. I can just slip it out of there, stick it inside the waistband with the soft loop, or carry it however I want to rig it up. So I really like that setup, and so I'll just show you the sheath in a little bit more detail. Like I said, it's not perfect, but if I put a little more time into it, I definitely could have helped the fit and finish a little bit. I mean, for example, that rivet or that eyelet down there on the bottom is split a little bit, so it's not perfect. I could pull that out and redo it, but Honestly, it works. I don't really feel like redoing it. You can tell I have a little drain hole there on the bottom. Where that Kydex is a little shinier, that's actually where it got just a little bit too hot with the heat gun, and it kind of took on that color. Again, nothing too serious, just, you know, doesn't look perfect. Up here at the top, you'll notice I actually did space these eyelets properly, so that if I wanted to pull that soft loop off, I could throw on a molly lock, and so that gives me another way of attaching this to gear. And then up here on the top, I actually did add a little thumb ledge, so you can actually push off there to help you extract the knife. So overall, I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. Again, it's not perfect, but for $5, I have a functioning Kydex sheath that is, I'm really happy with it. So let's take a look at my holster. Alright, so this is like take 20, I think, but this is the most involved project that I've made so far, and this is the holster for my SIG P226, and I'm pretty happy with it, and I really like the way it turned out. Just checking retention on here, I mean, it locks in there really solidly, there's no wobble or anything, and you know, just checking it upside down, just for the sake of checking retention, I'm going to throw a loaded magazine in there. The gun's empty, so it's still an empty chamber, we're pretty safe. But turning it upside down, you'll notice that it retains in there pretty nicely. I mean, if I really tried, I could shake it out, but, you know, just generally, the gun retains in there. And that's kind of one of the balances you have to reach when you're making one of these holsters, is you need enough retention that the gun's not just going to fall out when you don't want it to. But if you made it, you know, retain so tightly that you couldn't shake the gun out at all, even if you tried, then when you go to draw the gun, you're not going to be able to get it out of the holster. So that's one of the things that kind of takes a lot of the time when you're making one of these, is you kind of got to fiddle with it and, you know, just kind of tweak it a little bit, just to get it to really, you know, kind of retain exactly how you want it to. And as talking about time, making Kydex yourself does take a lot of time, and that's really one of the reasons why it's so expensive when you go to buy it. I mean, it's just a handmade item that you really just kind of, you know, got to sit there and put some time into it. This holster took me about 7 hours to make. I just worked on it over 2 days in the evenings. Not a big deal to me, but you know, if you're like me, you've probably got more time than you do money, so it doesn't bother me too much sitting down and working on something like this. I kind of enjoy it anyway. But some people out there might be better served just going and buying some. If you don't got a lot of spare time, it might not be the type of thing that you want to get yourself into. So, looking at the holster a little bit more, you can get some pretty nice features when you make your holster yourself. Things that you might have to pay more for, you know, if you were going to buy one. Things like this. I flared my my belt loops on here, and so that just makes it a little bit easier to feed belt loops in. It's kind of one of those, you know, special features that you'd maybe have to pay a little bit extra for if you were going to, you know, buy one of these. I did use kind of a medium sweat guard on there, just enough to cover the controls, but, you know, I didn't want it to be much higher than that. And talking about materials on here, I did use a .06 Kydex, and so that's one of the thinner Kydexes, and so it's a little bit more pliable, maybe not quite as durable, but I definitely don't think you're gonna have too many issues using a .06. And if you're just starting out making holsters, I would definitely recommend that you start off with a .06. It's just a little bit easier to mold, a little bit easier to work with, and I mean, if you know, kind of get down, you're working with a .06, and in the future you think that you might want to work with a little bit stiffer material, you know, then move on. But I'd say starting off with a .06 is definitely a good idea. So, you know, looking at the holster a little bit further, one of the things that I did kind of screw up on a little bit is this eyelet right here. You'll notice that, you know, the way you get your retention on this kind of pancake style holster is that when you draw the gun, you know, the holster spreads out just enough to let the gun out. And so what I did there is I just put this eyelet in there. It just stops the holster from, you know, spreading quite as much, and that increased my retention. So, yeah, it's one of those things that, you know, if you bought a custom one, you might not actually have to, you know, have that, but it doesn't bother me too much. So I really like the way it turned out. Alright, so if you're interested in making your own Kydex stuff, there's a few places that I would check out. First off, just for getting materials, I would just go straight to Amazon.com. That's where I got mine, and that's the best pricing that I've found so far for just straight black Kydex. Now, if you're wanting different colors, you know, Kyde brown or OD green or whatever, you may have to check elsewhere. But for just good black Kydex, Amazon's the best place. I bought 12 by 12 sheets in an 8-pack for around $30, and so that's a pretty good price. I mean, it comes out under $4 a sheet, and so that's really good. Now, if you're looking for like hardware, you know, Chicago screws and eyelets and soft loops, and even some you know, basic tools like a set punch, I would check out knifekits.com, and that's where I got my stuff. Knifekits.com has a really good selection of all sorts of different stuff, and decent pricing. Now, I would say you're probably going to want to put in a decent size order, and I mean, if you're just looking to just order, you know, one thing, they're going to kill you on shipping. But if you put in a decent size order, it should wash out pretty well. And so I was very happy with knifekits.com. They had really good customer service, shipped out fast, and I'll probably order from them in the future again. Now, as far as learning how to do this, you know, all the steps, all the equipment that you'll need, all that type of stuff, I would recommend you check out a YouTube channel that goes by Philly EDC, and that's where I learned. He has a really good 2-part series out showing everything on how to do this. You know, he shows you the part numbers of everything he uses. I mean, really in depth. It's probably a little over an hour if you watch both parts, but it's well worth it. I mean, you learn all the little tips and tricks that you need to know. And he's actually been successful at it enough that he's turned it into a full-time job selling Kydex. So he's really good. I recommend you go to his channel and subscribe. I'll put a link below this video to where you can find him. And so there were a few variances that I made on what he was doing, mostly just because I didn't want to go buy a bunch of equipment. I'm a pretty handy guy. I have a decent amount of tools, but there was a few specialized things that he had that I didn't really want to go buy. So first off, he was using like a little toaster oven to heat up his Kydex, and then he was using a laser thermometer to measure the temperature, and that's great. I didn't have a toaster oven I was wanting to use, and I didn't have a laser thermometer. So what I did is I just put this in on a cookie sheet in the oven in my kitchen on convection at 350 degrees, and it turned out just fine. So, I mean, it smells up the kitchen a little bit, not too bad though, and just open up the windows and you'll be fine. Now, as far as pressing this, he was using a really dense foam, and that's great. I mean, the denser the foam you have, the more definition you'll get. I was just using kind of a generic foam that I just found laying around. It was kind of like an egg crate type foam. So I did have to use a little bit more of it and compress it down more, and I didn't get quite the definition he has. I mean, if you look at his, you can see like every detail of the gun. But it worked, and as long as you have a heat gun, you can go in and kind of heat up little areas and tweak it, and you know, heat up the trigger guard to help get retention. So you don't have to have all the fancy tools that he has, but you know, those tools definitely make it easier. The final thing that I did a little different is that for setting the eyelets, he was using like a press and with some dies, and that's great. Very consistent, very high quality method. But that's expensive. I didn't want to go buy the dies. I didn't have a press. So what I did is I just went with this little hand press or hand setter. And this goes for around, I think, 12 or 13 bucks on knifekits.com. And this is the cheapest option I found so far. Now there's a little bit of a trick to using these, mostly just because the eyelets, well, I'll just make a video showing how to use this. There's a little bit of a trick to it, but once you get the hang of it, it's really not that bad, and this can definitely get the job done. So this is what I used. Every once in a while it'd booger one up and you'd have to, you know, pull it out and try to redo it, but not too big of a deal, and this will definitely work. So if you have any questions about any of this, definitely leave those comments in the comment section below the video. I'd be happy to talk with you guys about this. If you like what you saw, feel free to rate and subscribe. I'd really appreciate that. Everyone have a nice day, and thanks for watching.